Opening up the weekly Peacock and Williamson mailbag, we've got questions on what we learned from minicamps around the NFL, some fantasy-related questions, trying to rank quarterbacks and wide receivers and break up some groups there, and a little pushback on our take of positional value as it pertains to the NFL draft. All that and a lot more on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where most of the questions are coming from on today's podcast. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Make sure you subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you find your podcast. Some YouTube comment questions as well on today's pod, Matt. I want to start though with minicamps because rookie minicamps just got out of the way, and we're going to hit OTA season before teams, pack it up for a month and get ready for training camp. And so that's what happens at the end of May and into the beginning of June. We'll start here with our guy in 8 Seahawks on Twitter, who says, did we learn anything interesting in this rookie minicamp voluntary workout period with any of the teams?
No, it's the very short answer, but I wanted to talk about this because I don't think many people understand what rookie minicamp really is. I mean, I kind of equate it to college orientation. Like, remember you're a high school kid, bright-eyed, and you're not sure where the cafeteria is at. How do I get from this class to this class? Where's the bookstore? I mean, obviously it's a little different than that. It's football, it's the NFL. But really, rookie minicamp gets you ready for OTAs, which, as you mentioned, start next week. I'll beat the Steelers 3 days a week, which gets you ready for training camp, which gets you ready for the regular season. So things like this happen at rookie minicamp. Like, how do I work on my timing? How much time do I have after my wide receiver meeting to go get treatment if I need it, or get my ankles taped? When do I eat my meals? How do I set up my locker even? You're even getting fitted for pads and helmets and things of that nature. But things people don't think about, and this is a big deal for those dudes that are really doing anything they possibly can to catch a coach's eye, is you need to learn how to practice at an NFL tempo. Like, we can't have you flying around the field and smashing into Pat Mahomes and we get to OTAs. There's a certain tempo we play with here. And we're not going full bore trying to bull rush, our starting center play after play after play when we're just kind of doing almost a walkthrough tempo here. You know what I mean? So it's important. I mean, it teaches you this is the speed of the game at the NFL. We don't need you diving in people's knees and things of that nature too. And I'm sure people have questions, and I'm sure you can expand on it a little bit too, but it kind of just teaching people how to practice and how the NFL works. It's not the same as when you're at Toledo or Utah or whatever, Yeah,
it's getting a quick look at your rookies, getting some tryout players in, and the tryout players are really just adding players out there. So, if you don't draft the quarterback, you got to try out some quarterbacks so they can throw to the wide receiver you did draft. And so it's just getting guys together, get them up to speed. Terminology is different. You just got to get them a few practices under their belt so they don't walk. It's already hard enough for a rookie, and you're learning a new language with some of these teams, going from whatever scheme you ran in college to whatever you ran in the NFL, showing a tight end how to line up in line as a wide tight end for the first time in his life. And, so some of those really small points. So that way, when OTAs do start, they have a little bit of an idea what they're doing. And so they're not that far behind with the rest of the veterans that they're going to be showing up and practicing with. So I think it's just, getting the first things out of the way, seeing your draft picks and getting as many people ready to go, and taking a look at some undrafted guys and some tryout players as well, and seeing if any of them can stick for you and show you something. But so, you can't. You're gonna see, and the fans are so. This really happens throughout even OTAs and training camp, because you'll get beat writers that are like, "Oh, rookie quarterback was 6 for 14 passing, and this balls hit the ground." And it's like, There's some things you can tell. It's like, oh, this guy's big and he's fast. Like those are things you can tell when you see a player on the field for the first time with your guys and, beat writers that maybe you see a player on the college field, but what does it look like in the NFL? There's some things you can take away, or this guy's just like more ready to play than other guy is. But when you start getting like statistics from camp or statistics from practice, then it starts to get a little bit too much. But fans are obviously starved for information. But don't get too excited because the one guy like looked great in his rookie minicamp against another guy who's not going to make the roster.
Exactly. Like last year, I always bring back to the Steelers. I'm sitting there at OTAs, which we don't even go to rookie minicamp because nothing happens. We go to OTAs. It's like, whoa, they got a guy in George Pickens. Like there's obvious standouts, like you said. I also think sometimes, because you'll see this week, veteran linebackers get signed here and there, because what happens is, you draft a linebacker in the 4th round. He comes to rookie mini camps. He sits through meetings, and your linebacker coach goes to your head coach and GM and be like, that dude we drafted in the 4th round is a great kid. He's fast. He doesn't have a clue what he's doing. We might need to go get a veteran. Like when you really get your hands on the players, you have better evaluation than all the scouting stuff. And boy, was that true in the recruiting world. Like when we had our 25 scholarship kids who are 18 years old arrive at Pitt the first day, that is a tense day. Every coach is like, oh man, I hope the guy I vowed for didn't put on 30 pounds and, scam us. I have no clue who he is, first day away from home and he's doing drugs or something terrible, or, he's just living it up like he's a big man on campus. Like, boy, I hope we got what we think we paid for. And we've been blowing smoke up these guys' butts forever and trying to persuade them to come to Pitt. And they might get here and be like, I don't even want that guy. And same thing's true with like Pickens. Like Larry Fitzgerald walked on campus like, oh, I think he'll work. You knew right away.
I wonder how much of a wake up call it is too for recruits to get their butts kicked all, their entire high school career, to get them on campus. And then once they get on campus, the coach is like, all right, well, now you're here. So I'm going to MF you all day and get on your ass. And like, oh, wait a second. What happened to all the love and blowing smoke up my ass all this time?
Yeah. Strength coaches aren't your best friend. And, like I hate seeing the damn strength coach, or boy, I missed class and now I'm carrying a log up the stadium steps at 6 a.m. Great. Yeah.
So bottom line, you can't take much from rookie minicamp. Just don't look completely lost and be the guy that you thought you drafted, basically.
Yeah. Again, think of it as like college orientation. You're not going to know, boy, he's a player, he's not, but there is something good for the players there.
On that note, a question here from CC Ryder says, love the show. Thank you, CC. When teams pick up players from other leagues like the XFL, seems like those players would be too exhausted to play a whole season after just finishing one. And, that is one of the tough parts of it, because you just played a bunch of games. And, on the flip side of that, you see a lot of players in rookie minicamp. The 49ers had a guy that, couldn't finish, Joey Fisher. I thought he was a really nice undrafted free agent for the 49ers, but he couldn't finish practice. He was having heat exhaustion. Exhaustion is only 70 degrees, so he just wasn't in shape, probably because he was not a top pick. He wasn't on the banquet circuit necessarily, but you stop playing football and you start preparing for a track meet, and then all spring long, and all of a sudden you get to practice like, oh, this is football again. There's a whole different level of conditioning that if you're not ready for it, that can hit you. And you see injuries a lot in these first OTAs and camps from rookies, and injuries at the beginning of training camps because some guys just aren't ready. So you see a lot of that. And on the flip side, with some of the XFL guys, and Matt, our teams picked up the 2 best receivers in the XFL this year. Jacour Pearson, 5'7", 180 pounds speedster the 49ers brought at a tryout, and Hakeem Butler, who was one of my pre-draft crushes.
I love them coming out, boy.
He was awesome in the XFL this year, and the Steelers brought him in, and I believe officially it wasn't just a tryout; they officially signed him, right?
Yeah, they did. They also signed a XFL consensus All-Pro corner. So some teams have been aggressive with these leagues,
and so that's one of the things that I've tried to tell my listeners, because Jacour Pearson looked great at rookie minicamp. It's like, this guy's in mid-season form. He just played a season, and he's just making guys look silly. Plus, he's got like 4.3 speed, so he's blowing by these tryout guys. And it's like, well, let's calm down. We'll see what he looks like in camp when other guys catch up and have had a chance to practice. But he's like in mid-season form. So the XFL guys are going to be ahead in these mini camps and OTAs versus some of the rookies, most likely. But at the end of a season, after playing however many games they played, it was 6-8 games they played in the XFL season, plus
something like that. I'm not positive.
It makes the playoffs. We're talking 20 games, and then plus, so they could run out of gas. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add to it, but I do think it's an interesting discussion in that maybe, I mean, it's not because players are lazy, but most 99% of the NFL players aren't in game shape right now. I mean, that's why you don't want to go to Miami in week 1 or Denver in the light air. I mean, it takes playing the game 50, 60, 70 snaps a game to truly get into game shape, no matter who you are and how much you take care of yourself. And all those XFL guys are going to be in better shape. I mean, I absolutely think so. They're ready right now. It's just like in the middle of their season. So I think that they do come in and make a better impression right now because they've been hitting, they've been tackling. I mean, they've been catching and running against 10, 11 other defenders, things of that nature.
And they're not rookies.
And they're not rookies, right? They've been around the block. Yeah. Great point. But I do worry that there probably is the equivalent of a rookie wall for those guys too. I mean, if your Niners receiver is a star and they love him, and all of a sudden he makes a team and he's playing regular snaps, by week 12, I bet he's spent. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Next, Matt, we've got some pushback here, especially from Lions fans that we've been a little bit harsh on with how they utilized all of their draft picks in the 2023 NFL draft, and the conversation about positional value and when to go away from that, and how much that really matters depending on how your team is built. And it's a good question. And want to talk about we have an interesting question about if all NFL players were waived, who are the first players that would be claimed? We're not going to go through all the first 32 questions asked because we don't have time for that. And then, why do picks miss? Why do draft picks fail? What is the common denominator there? All that and more, some fantasy questions as well. Finish up this mailbag episode of Peacock and Williamson. Today's episode of P&W is brought to you by Built Bar. I know you're looking for the delicious snack. Everyone is. I always am. But you don't want all the sugar and calories, but you want it to taste good. So go find the best tasting protein bar ever, Built. You got to try these. I'm always trying to eat healthier, make healthier snack choices. The easiest ways to get the things that are bad for you out of your reach, right? Get them out of your purse. Get them out of your glove box in the car. If you got a long commute. Get them out of your desk at work. Get them out of your pantry at home and replace it with a box of Built Bars so you can get low sugar, low calorie snacks that taste amazing, that are high in protein, and everybody's diet probably needs more protein, whether you realize it or not. And most Built Bars covered in 100% real dark chocolate, which really set them off. You got new flavors like crispy Built Bars that are the brand newest right now. And I'm looking at them on built.com. We got peanut butter crispy bars. We've got mint chocolate crispy bars. The peanut butter, the OG peanut butter bar is my favorite, by the way. But they've got Built Puffs, all kinds of limited flavors happening all the time. And not only can you find all the flavors and varieties at built.com, you can find them on store shelves at Walmart and Sam's Club as well. So pharmacy section, 4-bar boxes at Walmart and 13-bar boxes of some hit flavors at Sam's Club. So run in and grab yourself some Built Bars and then thank us later. And of course, find them all at built.com. Okay, Matt, I want to start here with Joey Bag of Donuts. And he says, what's the biggest factor when a draft pick fails? How much does coaching factor in? How far in advance of when the public finds out do teams really kind of know what's going on?
I mean, if I knew the answer to that question, it's kind of like, I would be the GM of the year and would never miss on picks. And, I mean, obviously there's a massive human element to it. And it's an art, not a science, bringing in players. I do think, and I'm kind of taking the easy way out, but I believe this stronger than ever, that if quarterbacks are stocks, much more so than I believed 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I care more about where they land than who they are than I did then. It's not the only factor, but some of these quarterbacks that went to Washington, it's like, oh man, you got a tough, you're not getting a lot of ownership help. They're expected to save a struggling organization. And I'm not picking on the Commanders, but I mean, time and time again, Dwayne Haskins, these guys go there and it's like, boy, you're swimming upstream. It's not a nice nest. I think that's unbelievably important because all these guys are talented. A lot about them. For the most part, they all work hard. They all do things you and I can't do, that few people on the planet can. Injuries can't be overlooked, though. I mean, the injuries these guys suffer, if you're around them, is like, man, that would keep me in bed for a year, and they get out there in 2 weeks or whatever. So I don't have that answer. It's a wonderful question. It's a multitude of things. But scheme and coaching absolutely is a factor. I mean, there's very few transcendent players that don't matter what scheme there are. If you're
especially
asking,
something that's as delicate as quarterback, and
well, that for
I
sure.
kind of do buy the idea in the I don't remember who said it first or if anybody said it first, but basically it's like, more coaches have ruined more quarterbacks than quarterbacks have ruined coaches, kind of a thing. And I can absolutely see how it would be a disaster for some of these highly drafted quarterbacks with the situation they go into. And their first 3 seasons, they got 3 different offense coordinators, right? And the talent's not good around them, and nobody knows how to develop the quarterback. And then by year 3, you're already damaged goods in the NFL if you're not good.
Oh yeah,
we talked about this in the past. If you're a first round pick, you're either worth everything or you're worth nothing in 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
As far as like trade value.
100%. I mean, quarterbacks are the best example, but it happens at all phases. If you're asking Vince Wilfork to do Aaron Donald things, it ain't going to work. You know what I mean? And small example is when I was with the Browns, Butch Davis was our head coach, and he came from the U. And because they had so much talent at the U, their defense was pretty static. They were a 4-3, man coverage, too high, whatever. They didn't go crazy. And he translated that to the NFL, and it worked really well with the Cowboys, who had a really good team as well. But the short end of the story is we were a base 4-3 when I got hired with the Browns. Well, the second Romeo Crennel got hired after, we don't want any of that stuff. We want Patriot 3-4, Vrabels and McGinnis and Wilforks, and it's like
suddenly nobody fits.
I just did 10 months of work through a different lens, and it's not like I'm going to throw all those scouting reports away, but I wasn't very interested in the Hamptons and Wilforks, when you go into colleges, and now that's what you're looking for. I wasted so much time. You know what I mean? Like, that happens all the time.
Absolutely. And look, injuries, there's nothing you can do about it. And there's a reason that even first round picks are a coin flip as far as, what you would consider a hit and a miss in the NFL. But, aside from quarterbacks, that's even more difficult. If it's just how you're wired. I think if you're smart and tough and you're going to work your butt off, you're going to be a hit in the NFL at most positions. And coaching is not going to hold you back as much if you are a linebacker or a defensive lineman as it would if you were potentially a quarterback and what's around you. So in that regard, the number one thing is get the person, the human being right. You're probably going to be in good shape most of the time.
You're right, because of course there's endless examples of he wasn't smart enough. He didn't work hard enough. He's not mature enough, doesn't like doing this. He's just doing it because he's good at it. So all those things. So and obviously those are hard things to judge when you sit down for 15 minutes with them at the combine,
Let's see if we can go quick on this one.
Okay.
Cole, rank these 3 fantasy perspective wide receivers long-term. Amon-Ra St. Tee Higgins, Jaylen Waddle.
Ooh, wow. That's a good one. So let me take a second to pump up my partner on Locked On Dynasty, Ryan McDowell. I think the best dynasty site out there is dynastyleaguefootball.com. And Ryan does tons and tons of work with them. I think they have a lot of good people. So I just pulled up their wide receiver ranks for Dynasty. Not that I'm going to agree with them 100%, but Waddle is the 5th. It was Waddle, Higgins, and St. Brown, right?
Yes.
Waddle is the wide receiver 5 in their rankings, and they have like 10 different people put their rankings in, and they kind of average them all out. Higgins is 7, St. Brown's 8, with Garrett Wilson wedged in there at 6. So these guys are highly sought after, really bunched together. If I were to rank them, I would agree and go Waddle 1. He's only 24. So's Higgins. St. Brown's only 23. I would have St. Brown over Higgins. So I would go Waddle, St. Brown, Higgins. But that's tough. I don't think Tyreek's going to be there forever. So Waddle's role might only be expanding. Higgins is a little up in the air, though. Is he always going to be second fiddle? Is he going to go to another team and not show that he's a true one?
Yeah.
So that's just he's a great player. These are all great players. They're all young. I trust what St. Brown has done translates to a Keenan Allen-like career.
It's a tough cluster to bust, so it's a good question. I would clearly have Tee Higgins third because he's not the top option now, and there's not a clear path to what he's going to be. And even if he ends up a number one option somewhere, that's probably later, and we don't know what that situation is going to be. Even though he's a really good player, so I put him third because we already know what the situations are, and they're already really good. And I might put Amon-Ra St. Brown over Waddle just because I know what his path is to targets, but I wouldn't fight you with Waddle one. Especially knowing long-term and how young he is and, how dynamically athletic he is and seems to be in a good situation coaching wise and, even getting fed with Tyreek Hill on the same roster. So yeah, I could see Waddle 1, Amon-Ra 2. They're very close, but I think Higgins is easily the third out of that group just because of the now and the future. And when I'm looking long-term, I don't know what's going on in 5 years, but look at a 2-3 year window. And right now you're getting a lot of value from both of the Waddle and Amon-Ra, and there's no reason why you're not going to get as much or more in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And just to kind of show what we talk about on Locked On Dynasty all the time. I mean, just to give you an example, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are in their own tier. They're 1 and 2. If you like one better than the other, if you like strawberry better than chocolate, great. And then A.J. Brown and C.D. Lamb are basically their own guys in tier 2. And then it gets into this conversation. Waddle, Wilson, Higgins, St. Brown, even like Tyreek, some of the older dudes. So it just kind of give you a pecking order of what you're comparing to. That's kind of how most people view it.
Am I crazy to think I would take Garrett Wilson potentially over C.D. Lamb?
I was thinking the same thing. And frankly, Chris Olave is 10 on this list. I would have him higher too. I mean, I've seen enough after 1 year of both those guys, and they're going up this board super fast, by the way. Yeah.
And if he hits with Rodgers too,
oh man,
if they build rapport as it might be next year more so than this year even, but man, better quarterback play, Garrett Wilson. Yeah, give me that all day. And, I like CD. We kind of know what he is. I don't think there's more there that we haven't seen yet. So I'd probably put A.J. Brown in his own category there, and then maybe even Garrett Wilson with the CD Lamb group.
I was thinking that too. I was like, we just talked about Waddle, Higgins, St. Brown, and Wilson's in between there. I almost just said, but I would take Wilson over all of them, and I would.
All right. Next, we've got a similar question, cluster buster around quarterbacks, and we got to address some angry Detroit Lions fans as well, Matt.
All right.
Thanks, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Shout out to the everydayers. Matt and I continue to do our thing all off season long. We've got one more division here to finish up our post-draft reviews. That'll be tomorrow, and it is the NFC West. How are these teams building in 2023 and beyond post-draft? All that and more coming up every day at Peacock and Williamson. Matt, quick quarterback cluster buster question here. The 3 quarterbacks in question, if I can find the question, which I lost. Here it is from Devo on Twitter. Start 1, bench 1, cut 1 for the rest of the career. We've got Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Herbert.
That's awful. I mean, that's really tough.
That's even tougher than the receivers for me, probably.
Yeah, me too. I mean, because there's really only one for sure, Mahomes, maybe Allen, and then you start to run out of guys you take over any of those 3 in terms of what you're going to do going forward. I guess I have the most concerns, that's not even the right word, incomplete grade on Lawrence. So I'm cutting Lawrence. I mean, if any of them happen to flop or show us negatives we don't know, maybe it's him, maybe because he's just a year younger.
Yeah, a little more volatile, but he could also end up being the best after just one more season.
Yeah.
But for right now, I probably agree with you, just more volatile than what he could be. I think you got to start Burrow because of what he has around him, how good he is, how good we know he is. And Herbert's just been a little bit more up and down, but you put him on your bench because
it's not so bad.
There's that upside of what he could end up being as well. And it's a little clearer picture than Trevor Lawrence at this point.
Yeah, that's the spots I would have put them in as well. This is kind of a fun game, folks. If you want to do this with running backs, linebackers, all-time greats, I mean, whatever, send us Twitter questions for next week. That could be fun. I just said great things about Lawrence, but he really only has 1 year to show us compared to the others. I mean, that rookie year, holy smokes. And I'm not cutting on him at all because I think 99% of the years he comes out, he would be the first pick in the draft. But I don't think physically he's John Elway. You know what I mean? Like, I think he was a little overblown as a prospect. I mean, in terms of raw ability. I mean, it's great. It's great. It's just not, boy, this is generational prospect gets thrown around a little too much. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying.
Right. Here's one. Speaking of Trevor Lawrence, Sir Madrissimo says, all NFL players are waived tonight. Who will be the first 32 players claimed? And we're not going to go through 32. It'd be an entire podcast or an entire series of podcasts here.
Maybe we should do that in July. You and I just have a draft. You know what I mean? Go back and forth.
That. Yeah.
Right.
Here's the thing is, so, sir, I gotta say, there's a little bit of a cheat that happens here for me when I see this question, because he says all NFL players are waived. Well, if we went by the NFL rules, these veteran players wouldn't be waived. So the players that would actually truly hit waivers and you would have an opportunity to claim on waivers, the veterans would be cut and they'd be free agents, right? So they wouldn't go through the waiver process. So Mahomes wouldn't be available. He wouldn't be waived. He's not going to go through waivers. But Mahomes would still be the number one pick, even with his contract. But if you're factoring in contracts and who's going to pick up what, maybe even after Mahomes, could Trevor Lawrence be the next one picked up just because of how cheap and what his potential could be versus some of the other quarterbacks that are looking at $50 million a year contracts.
So if we actually go through with this in kind of the down times of the NFL season and we just start drafting, we would have to set rules, because you did lay that out well. Like, do contracts not matter? Are we pretending like all these guys are coming out of college right now knowing what we know? You know what I mean?
Well, and when you do go through waivers, you do pick up the player's contract too.
Right. Or are we talking money too? Because that's obviously important. Age has a ton to do with it. We can't ignore age, of course. Mahomes would be one, and then it's those three quarterbacks we talked about: Allen, Hurts. I mean, maybe even Dak and Deshaun and Bryce Young. I think what would be interesting, not even the order of the quarterbacks you and I just start taking. I get Mahomes, you grab Allen, I grab Lawrence, blah, blah, blah. When would be the first non-quarterback off the board? Like, how many quarterbacks would go before you say, I want Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, a great left tackle? I would have to go pretty deep. Like, is Tua the cutoff point? Is Kyler Murray the cutoff point? If you're starting a team, would you rather have Kyler Murray or Nick Bosa? You know what I mean?
And the other part of the waiver rules is, because he says tonight, if this happened post trade deadline, then veterans would be through the waiver process. Remember Baker Mayfield last year, he would be cut if it happened today. But since it happened in the second half of the season, then so teams don't do weird stuff and stack rosters and, behind the back maneuvering, behind the scenes maneuvering, then everyone would be through waivers. So if we pretended this is the second half of the season, then it would change waiver rules, by the way. So if it was truly waivers right now, it would be rookie contract players. And then that's a different conversation, obviously, than if everyone was just cut and a free agent, you could go draft them and everyone was put into a draft.
I mean, maybe if we pretended this would be too much work for you and I doing a podcast, but if we looked at it through the lens of a fantasy auction draft, all these guys don't have contracts. None of them have a team, but we know everything we know about Mahomes and every player in there. Who would get the biggest contract if you and I are, auctioning for Pat Mahomes' service? And then who would be the second biggest contract? Third, you know what I mean? Like, who? That would be interesting to me. And I do think it'd be really interesting of how long would it take until the first running back came off? It would go forever. Bijan it would go forever.
Bijan, and it would be quite a ways. And it'd be the best question is like, when does the first non-quarterback come off?
Right. And when's the first offensive lineman fall? And it kind of goes back to that dynasty question about wide receivers. Like, there's a ton of wide receivers. Am I going to be the one that gets Justin Jefferson when I can get Jaylen Waddle 2 rounds later?
All right, let's address this from some of the listeners on YouTube. First of all, Louis, shout out to Louis. He's frequently commenting on YouTube and listens to the show every day. Shout out to the everydayers out there. He says, what does Matt have in his drinking bottle?
What are you sipping on now? The Yeti. So here's the system here in the Williamson household is I have 2 of these, the giant Yetis. And I probably should have 4 because they don't hit the dishwasher nearly enough because I just fill them all day. I drink an obscene amount of water. All it is in there is ice water. Sorry to burst your bubble. I should tell you it's, Stolies or something, but it is just ice water. Like everyone on their fridge, it tells you how many ounces when you fill up your water. So I used to chart it. I drink over a gallon of water a day, and sometimes well over. Like I go through like 30 of these a day. I mean, it's insane. So I just always have it around with me, and I think it makes me feel better. And I just have drank a lot of water my whole life. Sorry, it's not more exciting than that.
You're supposed to get a lot of water. Yeah, you're supposed to get that gallon a day. So good job. I got coffee, but it's also 9 a.m. on the West Coast for me. It's noon.
Right.
It's lunchtime for Williamson over there. So.
I have a cup of coffee in me that happened an hour or two ago. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Okay. We got to address this one, and shout out to Lester who commented on YouTube. And this is a long diatribe here, so I'm not going to read his whole response, but he's talking about our conversation about positional value and as it pertains to the Detroit Lions draft. And I'll go through some of his points here. He says, let me try to explain the draft and positional value when it comes to the Lions specifically. Edge rushers, Okwara, Kaminsky, Charles Harris, former first-round pick, Justin Houston, last year's 6th-round pick with 8 sacks in 7 games, Pascal, last year's 2nd-round pick, Hutchinson, last year's 1st-round pick, a rookie edge rusher, won't get much playing time on this team. I want to stop there. It does not matter. It does not matter. This year, you're not drafting for 2023. You're drafting from beyond. And I don't want to hear an argument that we have Charles Harris on our team, so we don't need to draft a defensive lineman. So
and he's a fine player.
Like that's bad process. Like that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Another lesson in this, and I'll agree with you here, Lester, is you don't want to force Charles Harris as your draft pick in the 1st round, which was a bad pick, we know, because you're trying to force defensive linemen. So you don't want to do that.
Right.
But there's a difference between you don't have to draft just defensive ends every year or just quarterbacks every year. You don't have to draft one position, but it's probably smart not to draft the least valuable positions too. So there's a lot of positions in between edge rusher and running back and off-ball linebacker. I'll just say that.
I agree with all that. I mean, with all respect, guys, to John Kaminsky and Josh Pascal, that's not enough for me not to take Will Anderson. You know what I mean?
And the Lions didn't have Will Anderson, and plus they traded back, and that wasn't a player on the board for them. But there were some really good players on the board. And he talks about wide receiver. He says maybe Njigba is worth a 1st-round pick, but he's a slot guy. The Lions have Amon-Ra St. Brown. I could see how that doesn't work out. Roster wise, they would play very similar positions. And he says there was no other wide receiver with a 1st-round grade in the draft. So I agree. I don't think you needed to force Njigba. I would still have taken Njigba, have 2 slot receivers, one Amon-Ra or Njigba. They can play outside as well. Just be better, more valuable than because what one of the things that you're selling Jahmyr Gibbs on as running back is because he can play receiver. Well, where's he going to line up? He's not going to be outside. He's not going to, he's not Justin Jefferson. He's going to line up in the same place that Amon-Ra St. Brown does, or catch balls out of the backfield. So, it's not much different there if you're drafting a running back versus a wide receiver, and those wide receivers are harder to find than the running backs. He talked about offensive linemen and where they're at.
Good line, right?
Penei Sewell obviously was a 1st-round pick not too long ago. They're paying a little bit of money to their other tackle, and goes through, and they do have a pretty good offensive line there. But the other thing I'll say is I would all day long have taken Broderick Jones over Jahmyr Gibbs, an offensive lineman there, because look, that way you don't have to continue to pay your expensive offensive tackle in a couple of years, and you can get better at guard now while he plays, right? And if you want to get better in the running game, draft an offensive lineman, don't draft a running back because of that, especially high, right? And here's the things, I would draft running backs all the time. I would draft them every year. I draft 2 a year, but they would just be on day 3 instead of in the 1st round.
And
so
run him into a wall.
I get what he's saying, but there's too much emphasis here on what this team is right now. You think you know what your team is right now, just wait 6 months. And you know what's funny, Matt? There was another video a couple months ago, and we were talking about the Detroit Lions, and we got a lot of pushback. In fact, I think it's our most popular YouTube video. And there was a bunch of Lions fans that hate watched it and were commenting, especially they were mad at you, Williamson. But one of the things we talked about was their running back and linebacker position. So Lions fans, you got to figure it out, because they were mad that we said we didn't like what was going on at running back and linebacker. And then the team agreed, and they actually drafted those 2 positions in the 1st round. They were also like, no, but that's not the way you do it either. So I think that's really funny too.
It is. And I'm not saying I'm 100% right on this, and frankly, like you do with the Niners, like I do with the Steelers, maybe I should look at this Lions draft with 100% focus through Lions lenses and just say, who would I have taken with that pick instead of Gibbs? Who would I have taken next? Because there are some good points in that email that, well, we needed a tight end. We needed a nose tackle. We needed a running back. We needed a linebacker. And we have, Smith Najigba's too close to St. Brown, and our line is in good shape. And we drafted at the end in the first round last year. And maybe for this team, it doesn't make enough sense to just draft positional value. All that being said, you got dealt wonderful cards for this draft. You got a lot of aces and kings and queens, and I just don't think you made it pay enough financially. That's how you have to look at the stuff, is the finances of it. And your example was great with Broderick Jones. Like, Taylor Decker is a good left tackle, but they have a hole at guard, and Taylor Decker is 28 years old, and I don't know what his contract status is off the top of my head, but it's not going to be long before he's going to be asking for $25 million a year or whatever. And
he's already on the books for it's in here, by the way. This is long. Okay. He goes into every position. Taylor Decker on the books for $20 million the next couple of years.
Yeah. So isn't it worth a first round pick to get, I'm pulling this out of my butt, 6 years younger and 12 million cheaper, and maybe not lose a step and maybe even get better? You know what I mean? Like, that in itself is worth a first round pick at left tackle. It's not,
and have them all, and have them all play together in the meantime before the rookie kicks out to tackle later, right? Protect yourself from injury at these high impact positions. He talks about cornerback as well. He says the Lions were probably going to draft Witherspoon, but the Seahawks took him at 5. Gonzalez will be great, but is a bit raw. Not as aggressive as Aaron Glenn is looking for. Lions signed Cameron Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, CJ Gardner-Johnson. The cornerback number 1 from last season is now cornerback 4. Pretty crowded room. Again, that's short-term, short-sighted. We got guys on 1-year deals there, and it takes corners a little time anyway. So, Gonzalez is another one that was like, kind of right there for you. And probably, now that I'm looking at it and thinking about it again, that's probably what, should have been the pick if you believe in him, and, maybe he's going to be a bust. And I look back at the 49ers because that's the team I cover the closest. And you go back to 2017, and now it's funny because they have Christian McCaffrey, but they drafted at number 3 after trading down for number 2. They drafted Solomon Thomas, and Christian McCaffrey had a better career. And in a vacuum, Christian McCaffrey, more valuable player than Solomon Thomas, right? And they drafted the defensive lineman. The running back was a better player and more valuable. Now they ended up getting that running back now, and he's on their team. But when you zoom out and you look at the philosophy of the D line, that's what's made the 49ers great. They didn't just draft one defensive line.
That's who they are. Right.
That's it. That process, even though they missed in that one instance and there was a running back that was worth more, and still I wouldn't have taken Christian McCaffrey. They're, the Mahomes, them not looking at quarterback was the other thing, the even more valuable position group. And they're like, we don't want to start with the quarterback with this new regime. We want to build from the defensive line out.
That's their identity. That's what
has made them go to back-to-back NFC championship games.
Right. You missed on Thomas, and you missed on Kinlaw, but that doesn't mean Buckner and Drake Johnson, or Drake, who was the pick last year, the second rounder, or
Drake Jackson.
Yeah. Buckner and Armstead and Bosa. It's not, the process was right. That doesn't mean you're going to hit on all of them.
And real quick on the thing about quarterbacks and D-line, sorry to jump over you again here, but cool. If you hit on a star defensive end and you're only hitting 50% and every other year you get one, that's way more valuable than if you hit on a running back every year. 100%.
Or Jack Campbell, right.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And the Campbell pick's the one I had the hardest time with, because first of all, I don't personally look at him as Roquan Smith coming out of school, he's a good prospect. He's not one of the better linebacker prospects I've ever seen, though, where Bijan was, so I just don't look at Campbell in that light. But real quick on the Lions corner room, I think it's a great point. And boy, it reminds me of my Steeler conversations, because when you're so focused on one team, you say, man, our corner room is so much better than last year. Our starter from last year is now my number 4. How great is that? But none of them are Gonzalez. None of them are the prototypical outside corner that might be a Pro Bowler. There's a lot of good players, but having a star talent like that, all those dudes you mentioned, Sutton, Mosley, all the guys you and I like as well, aren't good enough to say, I don't want a number 1 corner.
And especially with Christian Gonzalez, him falling a little bit, feels a little bit like AJ Terrell a few years ago, where it's like, like, oh man, what were we thinking? This long athletic cornerback, why did we let him fall? And then you see where he went, Bill Belichick. We're like, oh no, and we let Bill Belichick get his hands on him. Who knows how to coach up some corners?
Exactly. So this draft is so perfect. It's the perfect storm of this conversation because they had tons of resources, extra first round picks, and got good football players. And one of these guys might be rookie of the year. Brian Branch might be defensive rookie of the year, and Jahmyr Gibbs might be offensive rookie of the year. And it'll look like the Jets draft last year. And we'll get endless tweets, especially me, saying you're an idiot. Look how good their rookie class is. But there is a bigger picture here. When you don't have a left tackle 2 years from now and Taylor Decker's not there, or your corner room is still okay, that's what you're giving up.
Yeah, and in week 4, when you're giving up 48 points and you score 45 on offense because you can't cover anybody on the outside, that's right. Another thing that could happen as well. Although they did get better in the second half defensively last year. And I do want to say again, like they did draft good players and they got better. And they might have drafted 4 stars, and it might be a really good draft. But that, I'm just talking process. I'm talking philosophy here more than anything else. And I don't think they got great value, and I don't think they drafted necessarily a bunch of stars. And maybe they did. And I will say, tight end, as far as positional value goes, maybe one of the most underrated positions because of how they get paid. Because if you have a star tight end, you don't have to pay them anywhere near you're paying what a star wide receiver is, and they might be just as valuable, and in some cases more valuable than some of the really highly paid wide receivers. So if Sam Laporta hits, that's where you can start getting a lot of value, and then Brian Branch. So I like their second round a lot more than their first round for sure.
I do too. I mean, again, Campbell's my least favorite of the picks. And really, I'm even going to throw the nose tackle in Broderick Martin because he was a third round pick too. So all your day 1 and 2 picks, one of them to me should have been a high value position, a thought for tomorrow. It's just a little bit nearsighted for me.
And then long term, you think, okay, team building wise, you got these really good players. They're all studs at their positions. Well, now when you do need high end positions later, you have to pay them, and you have to pay them a whole bunch of money because you didn't draft them at the place that you usually draft those high value positions. They're harder to find, and you're probably overpaying someone who's not a star.
Yeah. A lot of it just comes down to finances, to be honest.
But again, and this is not to say that they couldn't be great players and have a good draft. When you look back, like if they hit on those guys, all gravy, it's all fine. And that can absolutely be the case. So I'm not saying they drafted 4 busts with their first 4 picks or that these players can't be good. I just disagree with the process and the philosophy of drafting a running back at 12 and an off-ball linebacker at 18. When there was other really good players on the board that were more valuable long-term to your franchise.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're on the same page there.
But I appreciate the comment. Thank you so much, everybody, for all your questions. Matt and I back tomorrow. It's time to break down the NFC West and finish up our post-draft reviews right here. Peacock and Williamson.